Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Giridharadhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Giridharadhari Jaya Giridharadhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Giridharadhari Jaya Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Bhajanana Yashodanandana Bhajanana Yashodanandana Bhajanana Yashodanandana Bhajanana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Tira Jaya Radha Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Jai Om VishvaKalyan Paramahamsa VishvaKalyan Ashtatar Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Abhay Charanarinda Swami, Abhay Charanarinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om VishvaKalyan Paramahamsa VishvaKalyan Ashtatar Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srila Gaur Kishordas Babaji Maharaj ki Jai. Bhakti ठाकुर महाशय की जय, जगन्नाथ दास बाबा जी महाराज की जय, षड गोस्वामी गणविंद की जय, रामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। रजभो वृंदावन धाम की जय, मथुरापुरी धाम की जय, द्वारकापुरी धाम की जय, अयोध्या मई की जय, यमुना मई की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, तुलसी महारानी की जय, राज नरसिंह देव भगवान की जय, समवेत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय, वर्तमान गुरु वृंद की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू असेंबल्ड डिवोटीज हरे कृष्णा, ऑल ग्लोरीज टू असेंबल्ड डिवोटीज हरे कृष्णा, ऑल ग्लोरीज टू असेंबल्ड डिवोटीज हरे कृष्णा, ऑल ग्लोरीज ऑल ग्लोरीज टू श्री श्री गुरु एंड गौरंगा, ऑल ग्लोरीज टू श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। Hare Krishna. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, clear.
I'll be sharing my screen in a minute. Yes. Today we'll be discussing Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada from chapter 2, titled Contents of the Gita Summarized. So we'll quickly chant some Mangalachan prayers and then discuss further. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Advaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Vishakanvitamscha Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantrastasya Namani Yani Karma Bhi Ekam Tasya Devasya Seva. Hare Krishna. So first of all, I would like to thank all the assembled devotees and especially His Grace Shivguna Prabhu for giving me this opportunity to speak on Bhagavad Gita, although I'm totally unqualified for such a magnanimous service. But for my own purification and for my own spiritual progress, all of you have very mercifully and magnanimously showered this mercy upon me. So I seek prayers and blessings from at the lotus feet of all the assembled devotees, so that the right words may be spoken with the right spirit in the service of Lord Shri Shri Radha Madhav. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. So today we are discussing chapter 2, text 54. Excuse me while I share my screen. Yes. So I just thought, so all these slides are basically, many times all of you have seen from Amritananda Prabhu. His slides are very, very meticulously done. And I felt like whatever I will do on top of that will be a waste, and it'll basically be undermining his effort. So I thought I will reuse whatever he has done and present it as he has presented it, very nicely summarized. So whatever you will be seeing now is basically slides from him, and a few points from Gita Daily, a website by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, which you all, of course, already know. So I will try to repeat what they have said and summarized from Srila Prabhupada's teachings and other acharyas. So we had a wonderful learning journey of Bhagavad Gita until now. So I thought I will summarize that journey from the beginning of chapter 1 till text 53. And then we'll have a deep dive on text 54. The situation is, of course, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, also Dharmakshetra, place of pilgrimage, where the Pandavas and Kauravas are assembled to battle against each other. And then so then there's a description of both sides of the armies. And then Arjuna also wants to have a look at both the armies. So he goes right at the midst of the battlefield. Then when he observes his relatives, uncles, friends, teachers, grandfather, etc. in the opposition party, then he presents some reasons to Krishna for not fighting. So what are those reasons in brief? One is compassion to the opposition party, and then there's loss of enjoyment, that I won't be able to enjoy if there's so much bloodshed. And then there's destruction of family traditions and lineages. And then the other one is basically saintliness and fear of sinful reactions, that if I participate in such a abhorrent activity of killing so many relatives and friends and well-wishers and things like that. Certainly not well-wishers, but relatives or bloodlines, I could say. So then he felt that it should be a very, very sinful and abominable activity, and he was very fearful of that outcome. And then finally, in 2.6, Arjuna presents his indecision whether he should go ahead and participate in this battle of Kurukshetra or to refrain from such activity. And then Arjuna surrenders unto Lord Krishna as his disciple, Shishyasteham Chadivam from Papannam. And then after that, Lord Krishna begins to reveal this transcendental knowledge of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So that way, chapter 1 and 2 we've summarized. Chapter 2 divided into multiple sections, A, B, C, D, E. So again, verse 1 to 10, Arjuna furthers his doubts, tells about his indecision, then surrenders unto Lord Shri Krishna. And then 11 to 30, basically from the Ashochan verse, Lord Krishna begins the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita by presenting Atma Tattva or Atma Jnana. Lord Krishna basically establishes the original identity of every living entity as pure spirit soul. And then by revealing that, he counters the argument of, which argument? That nothing will perish. Yes, I'll be muting participants. Okay. So, yes. So, fight, there is no death for the soul. Basically, when you establish that true identity, then your activity can be performed on the absolute platform. And then further, basically 31 to 38, now that the identity is established as Atma or spirit soul, then Krishna reveals how to perform or how to establish that identity. How does that spirit soul behave? And the elementary step in that direction or in that revelation is Karma Kanda. Basically, you fight for outcomes. So fight for gains. So Krishna is specifically here mentioning Arjuna or answering his question. So Krishna is specifically telling Arjuna that you have to fight. Why fight? For gains come from dutifully fighting and losses come from not fighting. So basically here, Krishna is refuting the argument of enjoyment. Earlier, he refuted the argument of compassion, that there is no death for the soul. So you are not nahanyate hanyamane sharire. You are thinking that you are slaying the body, but the soul cannot be slain. So all these living entities are existing since time immemorial. You are only slaying the outer garment, which is the body. And then Krishna refutes the second argument of enjoyment. How does he refute that in Karma Kanda? So Krishna tells Arjuna that if you fight in the Kurukshetra war and you win, let's say the Pandavas are victorious over the Kauravas, then they will enjoy a lot of opulence, they will enjoy their kingdom, and they will enjoy the royal lifestyle in the earthly realm, which means in this lifetime. And let us say that they are not victorious, they have been defeated by the Kauravas, and they even lose their lives in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. But we all know that Dharmakshetre Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra is a battle, not only a battlefield in this situation, but it is also a very holy place of pilgrimage. And not only that, the battle that was being fought was not an ordinary mundane battle or a territorial dispute. This is basically a dharma yuddha, dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So the Lord is establishing religion and eliminating irreligion. So in such a pious activity, if one performs, or if one even is defeated and loses his life, then he attains to the heavenly kingdom in the next life. So there is enjoyment in this life or in the next life, whatever the outcome may be. So there is no need to be worried about loss of enjoyment, because there is enjoyment either in this life or in the next. So that way Krishna gives the arguments of enjoyment. And then in 239 to 53, again in between there are 247, 248, Sarvata Sampratodake, that verse where Krishna is also defeating the argument of destruction of family traditions. That all Tavan Sarveshu Vedeshu Brahmanasya Vijnanataha. All activities can be accomplished by executing devotional service. So then 239 to 53. This is very interesting. This transition in section D is very important for us to understand section E. How so? In section C, we saw that Krishna is directly recommending Arjuna to fight. Basically, the whole question started with the indecision, if you remember. See, Arjuna had an indecision. What was that indecision? To fight or not to fight? And then Krishna explains the Atma Tattva and then establishes Karma Kanda as the first principle or activity on the platform of Atma Tattva. And then he goes ahead in verses 29 to 53 and explains that you should not only act on the platform of Karma Kanda, but go beyond loss and gain and attain to liberation. Seek for liberation. What is liberation? Beyond the outcomes of material desires. So, Nishkama Karma, Sakama Karma and Nishkama Karma. Krishna is recommending Nishkama Karma, which means Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Enamam Upayatite. Krishna is recommending fight, but without any reaction. So, this is very confusing to Arjuna. Why? So it's very clear. Krishna will fight, but without any reactions, which means what? Perform devotional service. Now Arjuna is very confused because earlier Krishna is telling you have to fight and you will victory or defeat, outcome is okay, no problem. And now Krishna is saying you have to perform Nishkama Karma, which means about devotional service and not expect any reaction or outcome. How is that possible? I'm fighting and not getting any outcome. Because Arjuna, of course, being a pure devotee, as of this scenario, because he is overpowered by Yoga Maya, he is playing the role of an ordinary living entity. And being thus illusioned, Arjuna is thinking that me fighting or participating in the battle of Kurukshetra is an ordinary activity which can lead to fruitive reactions. And if I engage in this activity, how is it possible that this can be Nishkama Karma Yoga? And then again, Arjuna is in a bit of confusion that Krishna, should I fight or not? Like, I'm thinking that if I fight, I'll get reactions. But you're saying fight with without any reactions. So how is this possible? So Arjuna is getting confused and he is asking some clarifying questions. So then that brings us to section E, 2.54, verse 54 to 72. And then in the we'll look at the synopsis here. See, Arjuna should rise above the good and bad of the Vedic formulas by knowing that the purpose of the Vedas serve Krishna, that is Nishkama Karma. And then we enter section E, where in today's verse, Arjuna is asking, who is Sthita Prajna? So let's read the verse, the synonyms and the translation. Arjuna Uvacha Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava sitadhi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. Arjuna Uvacha, Arjuna said, Sthita Prajnasya, of one who is situated in fixed Krishna consciousness. Ka, what? Bhasha, language. Samadhi stasya, of one situated in trance. Keshava, O Krishna. Sthita di, one fixed in Krishna consciousness. Kim, what? Prabhasheta, speaks. Kim, how? Asita, does remain still. Vrajeta, walks. Kim, how? Translation. Does anybody want to read the translation?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, please.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? You want to read the purport also, Prabhu, or you?
Sure. Anybody else wants to read?
Yes. Anybody else want to read? They can.
Prabhuji, can I read?
Please, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranams to all. Purport. As there are symptoms for each and every man in terms of his particular situation, similarly, one who is Krishna conscious has his particular nature, talking, walking, thinking, feeling, etc. As a rich man has his symptoms by which he is known as a rich man, as a diseased man has his symptoms by which he is known as diseased, or as a learned man has his symptoms. So a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms in various degrees. One can know the specific symptoms from the Bhagavad Gita. Most important is how the man is Krishna in Krishna consciousness speaks, or speech is the most important quality of any man. It is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak, and certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks, but as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. The immediate symptom of a Krishna conscious man is that he speaks only of Krishna and of matters relating to him. Other symptoms then automatically follow as stated below. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So here, this is a very wonderful purport. Very nicely explained as well. See, in the previous verse, see, Tada Yogam Avapsyasi. So Krishna is explaining that you have to establish yourself in self-realization. Tada, at that time, Yogam, self-realization, Avapsyasi, you will achieve. So Krishna is explaining that you have to fix yourself in transcendental consciousness or Krishna consciousness. So then Arjuna is getting a doubt that who is this person? Who is this Sthita Pragnasya? What kind of a person is he? How does he talk? And things like that. But it's very, very funny because I mean, imagine the scenario where they are situated. They are in a battlefield. And Arjuna is asking, should I fight or not fight? And then Krishna is explaining, fight, but don't have any reactions. And then Arjuna is asking, okay, what kind of a person is that? How does he walk? Or how does he talk? How does he sit? How is that connected to not fighting or fighting? Very, very interesting, right? So it seems as though it has a very a mundane. So from externality, it seems very, very very weird or very strange. but the deeper meaning is very, very significant. In fact, from verses 55 till 72, Krishna gives a very, very beautiful, elaborate description of each of these aspects. So it's a very interesting query by Arjuna that Sthita Prajnasya. Sthita means what? Who's situated. Prajna. This word Prajna comes right at the beginning of Krishna's discourse in the Bhagavad Gita. What is that verse? Anybody?
Sita Prajnasya Bhashasi.
So this word Prajna comes in the beginning of chapter 2. Anybody? Two 11. The first. Correct. Asuchan anvashochastvam prajna vadamsya bhasase. So what does prajna mean? Yes. Learned, which means what? Correct. Learned in what aspects? Here it means buddhi yoga, because Krishna has completed his description of buddhi yoga or establishment in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, here Prabhupada says Sthita Prajnasya means of one who is situated in fixed Krishna consciousness. Prajna means a learned man. A learned man basically means one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness in this context. Okay, so now basically Arjuna is asking, who is a person who is fixed in Krishna consciousness or in transcendence? See, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? So he is interested to ask, okay, how is this person fixed in Krishna consciousness, and will he fight? If he'll fight, how will he fight? That is Arjuna's clarification basically. So he's asking these multitude of questions. But it's very, very strange. He's asking four things. How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? How does he speak? Does he have a British accent? Hello, madam. Tea sipping. Or does he have a Desi accent? What is his language? Is he a Telugu fellow? Tamil? How does he sit? Does he sit on a floor or a deer skin? How does he sit in Padayappa or something? So is Arjuna actually interested in such kind of things? In the middle of battlefield, that too? Certainly not. So all these aspects have a very, very deeper meaning to it. So everything that we perceive has two different perspectives or points of view. One is the apparent realization, which is called aparatattva, and the other one is paratattva, which means what? One that is visible and one that is very, very deep. Paratattva, which means what? Which is higher truth. So here, what is the paratattva? What is the real intention of this query of Arjuna? Let us see. So what does speech mean? Before we get into that, Prabhupada used a word here, symptom. What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? So why are symptoms very important? Anybody? With the symptoms, we can identify the
diagnose. We can diagnose it properly. With the symptoms, correct. Diagnosis is possible.
Great. Anything else?
Symptoms also indicate the inner realization of the person, like whatever he has understood, like Prabhupada gives example, like rich man He behaves like that. So that's the inner, this one that comes outside naturally.
Exactly. In Telugu, and there is a famous poet called Vemana, and he gives these sutras of learning. So there is one famous verse. Then goes, ఉప్పు కప్పు రంబు నొక్క పోలిక నుండు చూడ చూడ రుచులు జాడ వేరు పురుషులందు పుణ్య పురుషులు వేరయ్య విశ్వదాభిరామ వినురవేమ. Which means camphor and salt, when they are in their powderized form, they look similar, but their characteristics are different. So similarly, amongst personalities also, they might look similar, but their characteristics and consciousness is very, very, very different. So which is why it is very important to understand the symptoms of a sthita prajna, or of a personality fixed in transcendence or Krishna consciousness. Why? So that we can understand what is their true inner character, like you all have rightly mentioned. So Prabhupada hits the purport and elaborates this point. He really drives this point home very, very nicely. And the way Prabhu also summarized it here is fantastic. See here, importance of the word symptom. As there are symptoms for each and every man in terms of his particular situation, similarly, one who is Krishna conscious has his particular nature. Talking, walking, thinking, feeling, etc. So what are these various symptoms? As a rich man has a symptom by which he is known as a rich man. Prabhupada, this is straight from the purport. As a diseased man has his symptoms by which he is known as diseased. Or as a learned man has his symptoms, so a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms in various dealings. One can know his specific symptoms from the Bhagavad Gita, which will be explained in the further verses. Now, amongst all these verses or all these symptoms, Prabhupada states in the purport that what is the most important symptom? Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks. For speech is the most important quality of any man. Very interestingly, Prabhupada elaborates this point. It is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak. Which means what? A person can dress himself very, very scholarly, but as long as he doesn't open his mouth, he is undiscovered. There's a very famous example that I remember of this. I remember that Einstein had a driver. Anybody heard of this narration?
Yes.
Yes, it's very famous. Einstein had a driver, and Einstein was delivering a particular lecture in around so many universities. And this driver also used to take Einstein there to the universities and attend his lectures. And then it so happened that once Einstein couldn't deliver his lecture, so he was thinking what to do. And the driver said, I have heard it so many times. Then Einstein shocked. And then the driver goes there and to the university, because today, I mean, those days it was not the age of social media. So people didn't know who was Einstein, but they know that he was the famous person. They didn't know how he looked or how he spoke or anything like that. So the driver goes onto the stage and introduces that I am Einstein. I'm going to give the lecture. And then he gives a complete lecture and the audience is completely baffled. Arey, wow, what a nice lecture. How scholarly. This guy's a genius. And then suddenly what happens? From the audience, any questions? Some people ask some questions. At such and such and such, how to do, then there's a perplexing situation, how to answer the question. So then the driver says, Arey, such an easy question. You don't know this much also? This question, even my driver will answer. Then he will point to Einstein and say, this is my driver. Come on, tell the answer. And then Einstein will answer that question. So anyway, point being, unless a person opens his mouth, then his foolishness is hidden. Very beautiful example by Prabhupada. And certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. So what is the immediate symptom of Krishna conscious person? Very, very important. The immediate symptom of a Krishna conscious man is that he speaks only of Krishna and of matters relating to him. Other symptoms then automatically follow as stated below. Below means in the forthcoming verses. So what is the primary symptom of a person situated in Krishna consciousness? He is always thinking of Krishna. So what is if Krishna consciousness is summarized in one statement, what is that? We all know very well. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. That is the man who is situated in transcendental consciousness. Now, getting back to the other symptoms, Arjuna is inquiring about some further activities or some further symptoms. How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? So apart from the external inference or the external meaning, what is the deeper meaning of these statements or these inquiries? So what does speech represent? How does he speak? Means what? See here. Sthita pragnasya ka bhasha. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, bhashyate iti bhasha, which means what? Language. Bhasha means language. All of us know. Bhashyate iti bhasha. One that describes or elaborates is called bhasha. Which means what? What is actually bhasha? Bhasha means that which elaborates on the characteristics of something. Language is also that. Language is used to describe something, convey a meaning, convey an intention, describe an object, describe a situation, describe a person. Basically, it's elaborating on characteristics. That is language, conveying something. So bhasha means what? Not that if he's a Telugu speaking or a Tamil speaking or something like that. But bhasha means what is the characteristics of a person situated in Krishna consciousness. So Arjuna is inquiring that. So speak also means how does he react to the actions of others? This is very important. How does he react? In the Upadeshamrita, speech is very, very important. It's the first thing that is mentioned. What is that? Correct. Vacho Begam. And in that purport, if you read, it is so elaborately mentioned about how one should control the tongue. Anyway, the tongue is the entry point of food and exit point of speech. Point being, speech one has no control over. Words are uttered. What words you utter, you have control over. But after those vibrations are emanated in the atmosphere, the reactions and the consequences is no longer in our hand. So speech is always in our control. So one who reacts to situations is always very, 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 very controlled in speech and very selective in what he utters. So therefore, we understand that he is very, very composed in reacting to external situations. Sit. Okay, this is also very important. Seating. So what is the seating position of the heart, or what is the seat of the soul, which is the heart? So we understand that the soul is beyond intelligence, mind, ego, and senses, correct? So basically, Arjuna's inquiry about seating is, how is this person situated? Which means, how is he regulating his senses, his mind? That is the inquiry of sit. Doesn't mean how he is sitting or squatting or sitting on a plastic chair or something like that. It's a very mundane or external understanding. So samadhistasya Keshava. How is he situated in trance? Keshava, Krishna, Sthitadhi, one fixed in Krishna consciousness. Kim Prabhasheta, speaks. Kim Asita, does he remain still? Which means seated. Vrajeta, walks. See, sit. Mentality when senses are withdrawn from sense objects. How is he situated? Which means how is his senses controlled? Walk, which means what? How does he conduct himself in this universe? And not only that, how does he conduct his affairs? Because Krishna, after listening to Krishna's instructions or injunctions on Karma Kanda and then Buddhi Yoga, Arjuna is interested to see whether this Stita Prajna personality will fight, and if he'll fight, how will he conduct his affairs in a warfare? Because Arjuna ultimately has a question: should I fight or not to fight? That's the ultimate question that he asks. So then he is interested to see how does he conduct his affairs in this world. So that is how does he walk. Asita vrajeta kim. So walk means how does he engage his senses in Krishna consciousness. And then there are so many examples in our parampara, starting from His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada and the sincere followers whom we've seen that day and night, how they're toiling in engaging themselves in Krishna consciousness. So that is basically a summary of the purport and the learnings that we've seen so far. We have another 10 to 15 minutes. Correct, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu, yes.
So I have a small activity, since we have around 34 people here. So if I divide, okay. Yes. Just a minute. Yes. So we have around 34 participants, including me. So there is a small group activity that we will try to do now. So I would request, at least for the next 10 minutes, if all of you can please switch on your video. It will be a nice interaction with each other. So I thought all of us can take association of each other and have a small group activity, because I am really missing all of your association in physical. So let's try to make the best of what we have as of now. So here's the group activity. So there are 4 things that are discussed in this purport. 1, how does a Krishna conscious person speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? Okay. How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? Now, let us take some lessons and takeaways from this, from these 4 categories. All of you will be divided into 4 categories. So group 1 or team 1 will basically be discussing how does a Krishna conscious person speak and how should a Krishna conscious person not speak. So you will list 5 points for each of this. And team 2 will be how does a Krishna conscious, what is the language of a Krishna conscious person? So 5 points, do's and don'ts. Third team, team 3 will be how does a Krishna conscious person sit, which means what in this context? How does he control his mind and senses? How is he seated or situated in Krishna consciousness? So 5 points to be situated in Krishna consciousness, and 5 points do's and don'ts, so that he is always seated, or if he does not do this, what will happen? So do's and don'ts. And the 4th team will say walk, which means how to engage one's senses in Krishna consciousness. and how not to engage. So do and don't. So we'll all split our audience into 4 breakout rooms. All of you will be assigned into 4 rooms. So all of you will be given 10 minutes of time. Okay. So in that 10 minutes, you should nominate one devotee as your team leader, and all of you will contribute points so that you will get 5 points, do's and don'ts for each of these aspects. So I will be now creating 4 breakout rooms, and you will have 10 minutes.
Prabhuji, 4 rooms, can you repeat again? How is he seated?
Yes. So room 1 will say how does he speak. So how should a Krishna conscious person or a devotee speak, and how he should not speak. Okay. And then team 2 will say what is the language of a Krishna conscious person. Huh? Language means what? We just explained now, right? How does he react to situations? So if there are tempting situations, because the material world is filled with tempting situations. So if there are temptations, how to react and how not to react. Do's and don'ts. Okay, team 2 is temptations. Team 3 is, or room 3 is, how to situate oneself, which means what, how his mind should be controlled, how his senses should be controlled. And team 4 is how to engage his senses in Krishna consciousness. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Team 2.
Just type it in the chat, Prabhu, so people maybe they can refer also if possible.
Yes, yes, Prabhu. So I will be opening the rooms, and you will have 12 minutes. So all of you will be assigned into rooms. So please nominate a team leader who will collect all of these points and present it to the all the devotees after all the activity is done. So it will be nice if all of you can turn on your video and participate, engage in the group activity.